Hello and welcome to a draft special episode of Zero Hanger TV, brought to you by Zero Hanger and Rookie Me Central. And helping me out, as always, to cover all things the AFL draft is Rookie Me Analyst Michael Alvaro. Michael, how are you?
Yeah, good. Really good to be back in the Zero Hanger studios with you, Mitch. So, yeah, excited to talk a bit of champs footy.
Yeah, plenty to cover. We'll be wrapping up the National Championships with the Allies, an unpredicted win, but certainly a massive talking point in the world of draft football. On top of that as well, some of the prospects that really took advantage of the carnival. We'll be looking at some of the father-son, NGA and Northern Academy players to watch out for the rest of the season as well. We'll be naming our top fives, having a look at the gap between Harley Reid and the rest of the pack and whether that might be a little bit shorter after the carnival. And we'll be answering some fan questions as well. All that and more coming up in today's very special draft episode of Zero Hanger TV. The 2023 National Championships concluded on Sunday with Vic Country claiming a pretty solid win over Vic Metro to wrap up this year's proceedings. But I think the biggest talking point from the 2023 under-18 season was obviously the Allies going undefeated. Hadn't won, I think, multiple games in a single championship season prior to this year, and they certainly had hold on the competition right from their first game. Obviously a great mix of Tasmanian talent, some of those Northern Academy kids, and they could be looking at 4 or 5 players in that top 10 bracket.
Absolutely, they could. They could have a couple in the top 5 or 3 probably, which is exciting. It's good for the Northern Academies and the clubs up there in Queensland and New South Wales as well. And then also for Tassie, because they're going to have a new team. So, it's one of the more balanced and deeper teams I think I've ever seen in the championships. And you say it's a bit of an upset kind of triumph, but ask them and they had full faith from the start. So, it's good to see Riley Sanders take out the MVP as well. We'll probably touch on him a bit later, but yeah, one of the better championship sides you'll ever see.
So, I guess, when you mentioned the top prospects and Sanders taking out the Lark medal and Sullivan taking out their own MVP, but there were certainly a few that took their chance for the Allies under Mark McVeigh, Colby McKercher being one, probably that top Tasmanian talent, rivaling Sanders for that kind of honour, and then Jed Walter as well, Ethan Reid and Jake Rogers, who have gained a lot of attention, I guess, over the season so far, both in the NAB League and in the National Championships, given their link to the Suns. How did you see, I guess, those kind of names progress? Most of them probably improved their standing from prior to the National Championships.
Absolutely. I think most of them were pretty highly touted regardless. Like coming in, for me, they're all top 15 players. And they've only really solidified that in everyone's mind, I'd say. And they're the half dozen that really all could have taken out the MVP award. So incredible players. They all had great carnivals. We'll list them off. And this is in order, probably alluding to some rankings later on. But for me, Jed Walter, probably the number 2 player in the country at the moment, and Colby McKercher's right with him. They're the 2 challengers for Harley Reid's spot at the top of the tree. So fantastic carnivals between the 2 of them. Ethan Reid, the ruck, could be anything, bit of a unicorn. And the way he just took control and acted as a 4th mid made that midfield even deeper. And obviously he serves them well with his ruck craft. You've got Riley Sanders, as we'll mention, even more. Just a pure ball winner, tough on the inside. He, along with Caden Cleary, really dominated in the contest and allowed guys like McKercher and Jake Rogers, who's down there as well, another Suns Academy boy, to really get to that outside, show their class, use their speed, and even Connor O'Sullivan, talk about balance throughout a team. You've got Walter at one end, Connor O'Sullivan at the other end, and all those midfielders in between. So just a great spine, and they're really the sort of half dozen that led the side, but the depth was there as well.
Yeah, there's some of those standouts. As you mentioned, Walter, it's not just his attacking ability, but his defensive efforts.
Yeah.
When the ball's kind of coming the other way or outside of 50, he's one as a bloke, he looks 25, 30, as a 17, 18-year-old, to be kind of, running down some of those defenders who are, we're seeing a lot of pace now from halfbacks, and he's certainly giving up a decent chase and putting up some great numbers as far as forward pressure and tackles. So, he's done his stocks fantastically well.
And on that, there are times if you're sitting near recruiters or people like that where they'd just be giggling when he's chasing down a player because he's pretty scary. Like if you're sitting up close on the boundary, you can feel his footsteps, and I can only imagine what some of the opposition defenders were thinking. Even like Ollie Murphy, who won Vic Metro's MVP, said he was the toughest opponent he's played on, and you can see why. Like he dominated some of the better players during the carnival, and is just unstoppable, particularly in the first half of games, like when he's really full of energy and using that intensity and hunting the ball. Watch out.
Yeah, we probably haven't seen probably a top pick key forward with his size come through in a while. Maybe you go back to Tom Boyd, Jonathan Patton, and those kind of pick ones that GWS pulled in a decade ago. But since then, it's a lot more athletic types like your Jamara Ugle-Hagens. So it'd be interesting to see how he fares at AFL level, and probably won't look out of touch in his first year. Another one I wanted to mention was Colby McKirch. We touched on a little bit on him, and he's certainly one that's been a consistent performer under your eyes through the NAB League as well, and really showed his stuff at the National Champs. Speed, explosiveness, ball winning ability, impact on the scoreboard, and a word that gets thrown around a lot is clutch. There was that last Allies game when he notched up a couple of late goals at RSCA Park, and just showing his I guess attacking traits as well as a midfielder.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's got such a great inside-outside balance, so he can win so much of the ball. It doesn't matter whether he's the first ball getter or the receiver. He has an impact either way. Just his turn of speed's electric. Like he can burn away from a contest like it's nothing. Carves through contests like a hot knife through butter. So he's just super classy. And for me, he's number 3. I'll give you that spoiler because it's an easy one. I think most people would have him 2 or 3 at the moment. Just an unbelievable player, and his numbers are extraordinary. And we've got our own Rookie Me Central medal for the Talent League, and he's only played, I think, 6 or 7 games. He's gotten 5 votes in each. So just goes to show his consistency and the level that he's playing at. Just, a super talent. Yeah,
and while the last game of the Champs was underway on the weekend, he was again leading Tasmania against Oakley Chargers, and just added to his fine season. We'll kind of touch on maybe each of the state teams quickly. So we've kind of covered the Allies a bit and their undefeated season. South Australia, I guess, a bit disappointing, I think, for most. Sid Draper, bottom ager, younger brother of Collingwood's Arlo Draper. The standout for South Australia, Jack Delank, had a bit of a say on their scorers, and maybe one of their main men in attack when the ball hit the ground. Ashton Moore, not the carnival he was probably hoping for, probably entered as a top 5, definitely a top 10 prospect in the eyes of most, and has slid out of that window. Some would say Luke McCabe, another one. Will McCabe, son of Luke. Yeah, he's for the Hawthorn father-son pick. Another one that's kind of impressed a little bit and had some runs on the board prior to the National Carnival. What did you kind of see from South Australia?
Yeah, I mean, you've wrapped it up pretty well. They were disappointing, though, let's be honest. For such a big footballing state with great history, like, they should be doing a little bit better. They probably won't have the draft crop that we'd expect of them. Only winning the one game. They beat Vic Country, to be fair, which is a pretty good win on the road. That one at Icon Park as well. So that was a good victory, but they went down to everyone else and had some pretty heavy losses along the way. But in terms of the players that I liked, pretty much all the ones you mentioned there. Sid Draper was outstanding. Of course, was South Australia's under-16 title-winning captain last year. So kind of makes sense that some of their better players are coming from that crop. You look at Tyler Welsh as well. Will McCabe played in that team, even though he is a top ager now. So, all class. And again, it's the balance throughout the lines. So Tyler Welsh playing as a key forward. You've got Sid Draper in the midfield, and then McCabe down back. Will Patton as captain was pretty handy. Another guy in the leadership group, Kane McCall, have had a good champs. Was solid in midfield. But they just probably couldn't feed their match winners like DeLee and like Moya enough to really get the results on the board.
WA, kind of a similar, output from them this year. Like you said, a big footballing state, and when you've got your 2 Vic sides, always going to be up there or thereabouts, and then all of a sudden you've got this Allies side flying. Yeah. Pressure does kind of turn to SA and WA, similar kind of return for them with SA.
Yeah, I mean, disappointing really. If you look at it from a pure results perspective. Obviously had two pretty damning big losses against the Allies and Vic Metro. They don't tend to travel too well, so it's not a massive surprise, but they still fared pretty well at home against Vic Country. It was a tight loss there, a really entertaining game where their MVP, Dan Curtin, was fantastic. And he's really sort of in that top 5 mix, definitely a top 10 prospect. He's only really stamped and enhanced his credentials throughout the championships. But then, they had those 2 heavy losses and it was a bit disappointing. But in terms of the other prospects that impressed, guys like Cohen Sanchez, he's really got back into his groove. I think recruiters like him for his speed, but also his work rate. He hit the scoreboard too. We saw he kicked multiple goals. Colton Tholstrup as well, up forward, got into his groove. Once he entered the championships, only played 3 games after being injured for the first. Clay Hall had a good chance as well. Playing through midfield added a little bit of bite, just something different to that on-ball group. So they've got their prospects. Mitch Edwards as well, obviously was injured for 1 game too, but yeah, he's a class player, probably a top 10 prospect too. So there's a good core, but they just didn't have the consistency throughout.
And we'll look at both the Vic clubs. On Sunday at Icon Park Country, got the bragging rights over, pardon me, over Vic Metro. Zane Dersma, standout. Harley Reid at his best once again. What were kind of your key takeaways from that match on top of what you've kind of seen from both sides through the carnival?
Yeah, well, it goes to show really, especially with their performance, like they lost to South Australia in the first game, but really built as it went on. So, you pick up a couple of wins and put on arguably your best performance in your 4th game. That was the case with Country. And as you mentioned, Zane Dersma, he had his best game in that 4th game, playing a bit more forward. I think that's his natural position. Kicking those 4 goals and really turning the game alongside the MVP and co-captain Harley Reid, who was really just fierce and physical as you'd expect at the source. I think those 2 are the difference makers. In particular, Darcy Wilson is pretty classy too. It was good to see him play more midfield, kind of swapping a role with Dersma in those final couple games. So you get to see different aspects of their games. They're probably the best 3 prospects from a Country sense. Going down the list, Joel Frazier as well on a wing, probably played his more natural position again in game 4, where he's just utilised on that wing, whereas he's been thrown around into the midfield up forward. We know he can play a bit of everywhere. And probably should mention George Stevens as well, who had a super champs and probably would have been right up there in the MVP discussion for Country. Of course, they're decided by the states themselves, not by any sort of outsider panel. So, Stevens was great, just a real consistent performer in midfield, big solid body. So, he did his stocks no harm.
And I guess a lot of talk this year. I don't think we've had I've seen so much talk about bottom age players this year. And what we've seen, a lot of them standing up really tall. Finn O'Sullivan being one, just such a clean player on the inside. Obviously a draft chance for next year, but geez, he's doing his stocks some decent help with his champs this year.
He's a known quantity. He was last year's Kevin Sheehan medalist as the under-16 MVP in Division 1, or Pool A as it's known now. So, anyone who follows it even loosely knows that he's going to be a star, and he's just so well-rounded. He's one of the midfielders, one of the many midfielders in next year's crop. That's going to be right up there in that top 10 frame.
And over to Vic Metro, they had some of their own bottom-age players kind of leading the way through midfield, and Levi Ashcroft, Jagger Smith, but more focus on the top-age guys. Nick Watson booted a bag, and Ollie Murphy stood tall to claim the MVP.
Yeah, Ollie Murphy, probably the most solid player across the 4 games. We were talking about it off air that you look at other guys like Nick Watson probably had 3 good games. He had 1 quiet one, but managed to snare goals in most and kicked a lot throughout the championships. Levi Ashcroft was probably a lock for it if he played all 4 games as well, but obviously they had a bit of premeditated rotation with their bottom ages and he only played 3 games. Jagger Smith, he would have been right up there, had a great game yesterday. Even Josh Smiley, he was fantastic in game 1 as well as those bottom ages. But in terms of the top ages, they've got some class. Guys like Nate Caddy, we know that he's a terrific talent and will be around the top 10 mix. Probably hasn't really done it against top level opponents, and that's maybe a bit of a knock on him and perhaps where he fits in at the next level.
Bit of a contrast between NAB League form and probably the state form, you'd say, so far this year.
Absolutely. And he's tearing up Talent League games with, big bags, kicked 6 goals in his last game against Bendigo, but was up against a bottom ager and then an undersized top ager. So it's interesting to note sort of how they're doing it and where they're doing it, because the National Championships, that's where the cream rises to the top, and where the cream of the crop is playing. So, that's the biggest test. That's the litmus test for all these guys. And I should shout out Will Green as well. He's probably a bit of a surprise in terms of the rankings. From my sense, he was in the top 20 last month, and probably doesn't have the biggest output as a ruck, but just does things really well. Got great fundamentals, and you look at upside, guy at 204 centimetres, moves pretty well, and you look into the future with someone like that, and the tools are really impressive. Even looking at Ollie Murphy, who took out the MVP award again, just has great upside. So there's not many players to round it out that are taking first round spots by the scruff of the neck, but so that's why these champs were a bit disappointing in a way, because you wanted guys to really stand up and take those spots, but it seems like that sort of top 15 is really set, and then there's just a blanket over 30 names after that.
Yeah, called the NAB League, Coates Talent League this year. I'll be calling the TAC Cup next as well.
Yeah,
bit more old school, but that's fine. We've named a few already in the show today, but we wanted to take a focus on some of the players who are linked to AFL clubs already, so father-son selections, next-gen academy players and Northern Academy players. So we'll start off with the father-sons, and there's a fair few playing yesterday, or a couple playing yesterday, some top age, some bottom age, one being Jordan Croft, key forward for Vic Metro, linked to the Western Bulldogs. Have you kind of seen his champs, and where do you kind of have him sitting in your kind of rankings?
Yeah, again with the Vic Metro rotation, he only played 3 games, which was a bit bizarre to me, but he's definitely a top 15 prospect. Should set the Bulldogs back a pretty penny, especially after they bid so highly on Jasper Fletcher last year, so that might come back to bite them. But he's a great player. I love his aggression and athleticism, so you can see him chasing down players, using his closing speed and then hitting players hard. And he attacks the ball in the air really nicely at 200 centimetres. We talk about upside, like it's a bit of a buzzword, but he's definitely got it. The way he moves, the way he attacks the ball, and what he could be is really what you're looking at. He's one of those tools that is definitely in the first round conversation.
Another one in that game, Conan Brown, linked to Melbourne as a father-son selection. All right, showed glimpses I thought yesterday, but and tried to just cap off an impressive enough champs.
Yeah, he's a solid player.
Yeah.
I think Melbourne will look at him later in the draft. He might even slip through to be that sort of Cat B, a bit like, there's so many NGAs and father-sons who end up sort of slipping to the rookie draft.
And I think they took Woden the last pick in 2021, so see what's there at the end of the draft.
Yeah, like the Davey twins as well. Jaden obviously taken with their last pick in the national draft, so that might be the case with Brown and Melbourne. Certainly knows how to rack up the ball. He works hard. It's probably just lacking that touch of polish and effectiveness on some of his disposal, but he had a great champs really, and did no harm to his stock. So can't complain from his end, and even from Melbourne, who have recently blooded a guy like Woden, who came from a fair way back. So anything can happen.
Another one we mentioned earlier, Will McCabe from South Australia and Central Districts. Spoke to him, I think, last time you were in here about how he was really doing his rising up the rankings as a promising athletic key defender, kind of intercept and lockdown option. I think that was after a couple of good stints in the Sanford Juniors. How did you find his under-18s performances?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because he probably had to play a different role to what he would like. So he's most effective when he's sort of coming in third up, intercepting, peeling off, things like that. Whereas he was really one of 2 key defenders for South Australia with Patton, who had to lock down a bit more on opponents. Like he played on Jed Walter in the first game, and that's a hard matchup for him because he's a bit of a leaner body, more athletic type. So he had to adjust a little bit and probably didn't get to show his flair and his on the ball potential. So a difficult champs. He wasn't the worst player. He was a steady performer, and still for me will be within that sort of top 20, around the 15 mark. So yeah, definitely a guy again who is going to be an interesting one for Hawks fans and recruiters to consider.
Last one I want to rattle off for father sons. Indy Kirk, kind of an interesting one with getting his opportunity this year through the Swans, and then Allies. How's he kind of worked in 2023 after last year?
Yeah, shown improvement. Like, he had a bit of an interrupted top age season, so he's come back and showed his wares for the Swans Academy, playing through midfield, which is a bit different because he played on the wing last year and a little bit up at half forward. So he's another hard worker, a bit of a smaller midfielder, but can play on both sides of midfield. Which is really handy. He's got that toughness like his dad, Brett. Plays with his heart and mind, which you love to see. And yeah, like he's going to be another one to consider sort of later on in the piece, you'd think. They've got a few academy members as well, obviously Caden Cleary, who we'll touch on a bit later, and a few others in a really even crop. So I think he'll be considered. And someone like Leon Cameron, who's coached at AFL level, is obviously in charge of the Swans Academy at the moment. He rates him really highly. So it's a good player, a good person to have vouch for you. And yeah, certainly he's going to be around the discussion.
We might move on to some of those academies. We'll start with the Northern Academies. We've kind of ticked off the Suns trio in Reid, Walter and Rogers, but they're not the only three that are probably looking at draft chances for the Suns this season. There's a couple more that are probably on that next line that are certainly a good chance to find list spots at the end of the year.
And this will be a very interesting draft discussion because there's going to be, we're assuming Gold Coast doesn't make finals. They get access to at least 3 bid matches in the first round for their academy kids. Then it's going to be very hard to match any other bids. And they've probably got 2 more draftable academy talents. I think it'll be interesting for them. You know, guys like Will Graham, he's draftable. Nick Williams as well, a tall defender. They both played in the same defence for the Allies and had a great championship. So, where they end up is going to be really intriguing. So I think they're 2 in the mix for sure for the Suns.
And then I guess a few more. So all 4 of those northern sides. So along with the Suns, Brisbane's Northern Academies, and then GWS in Sydney. So unlike a lot of people aren't too sure on biddings for these because NGA players, next gen players, actually can have their selections matched in the top 40, where Northern isn't the same. They can just go to clubs no matter if they're taking a pick 1 or pick 39. Obviously, they still have to hand over draft points and the equated draft points going off the index. But so these are the players that can walk to clubs just like at any selection, just like Harry Rouston did last year in the first round for GWS. So for those that are unsure, that they're the ones that walk to clubs and don't have any restrictions on their bidding. But for the Lions, for GWS, probably don't have the same standouts that the Swans might have, who we'll touch on in a sec, but who do you think might be looked at from those clubs? Yeah,
for the Lions, who had a bit of a tough campaign in the Talent League and less representation in the Allies as a result, Snell, he's probably the main one. Key defender, can actually play at either end of the ground and even roll through the ruck. So it's actually Patrick Snell. I've remembered his name. Daniel Snell plays for the Western Jets. But he's showed a fair bit. He moves pretty well, really solid aerially, can compete. And he's probably the main one. They've had Bradley McDonald, who was their Lions Academy captain. He recently played VFL. So they obviously rate him pretty highly. And at 199 centimetres, has good endurance, can cover the ground, but also locks down. Lacked a bit of confidence, you'd say, in his top age season to date. Probably hasn't found his best form, but they'll consider him. And for the Giants as well, they've got Charlie McCormack. He was probably the standout, a key forward, really rangy type and pretty raw prospect who probably needs a couple of pre-seasons in the gym, but talk about efficiency, he kicks goals from most of his touches, takes really good marks, can fly. So he's a good prospect. And young Thomas as well, the midfielder who got to play in defence during the championships for the Allies. He's yeah, he'll be around the mark. I think he's got super skills. Probably isn't like your most electric small, but his smarts and the way he uses the ball, just incredible. And the fact that he's proven himself both in midfield and defence, yeah, it's a good point of difference.
And the Swans, they've had such a good history with their academy and some of the picks that have come through, whether that was early or late. And again, this year, Caden Cleary could be a pretty, high-end pick. Probably not in that first bracket or two, but it's still, quite a decent selection to have your hands on already. I think they didn't get Errol Gould until midway through the second round when a bid finally came on him. So, like all draft prospects, you don't know what you get until you get them. But Caden Cleary looks like someone that could really be a solid top-line player.
Yeah, he's just, as you said, solid. Really competes hard at the coalface, and like considering he is probably an inside midfielder, and that's where he thinks that his traits lie, and it's true. But he's got a good outside work rate as well. And again, he's probably a player who lacks a little bit of polish on his disposal and decision making, particularly by foot. But on the inside, he just thrives. He's so clean, really aggressive, tackles hard. So, he's got that good balance of traits, and he's probably the standout with the Swans mix. They've got a few others. Obviously, Kirk we mentioned. Guys like Caleb May is a big, tall ruckman, over 200 centimetres. They don't come around very often. I'll consider him. Max Ryder, a wingman and half forward. Even Ty Gander as an overager this year was pretty good, and they had Lockie Kabor in the National Academy. He's probably a little bit behind all the rest of them, but on the radar for sure.
Cool. Lovely. And I guess now we might have a look at the top 5 or so picks that we both probably can see lined up. So maybe just not necessarily ordered on which clubs have which picks, but just kind of on talent alone. Maybe we'll extend that to a 6, because I think most people will kind of be sharing the view at pick 1 and being Harley Reid. I'm assuming you haven't changed from that regard.
No,
but
nah, not yet.
I guess we kind of mentioned at the top of the show, how big is that gap at the moment between Reid and maybe the likes of Walter, McKercher, Watson? Certainly come in a little bit through the national champs. Reid didn't put too many feet wrong and even took out the MVP, but it seems like a lot of that chasing pack had really, really strong carnivals.
Yeah, the gap's shortened. So obviously, for me, Walter and McKercher are the 2 challengers for Reid. They're probably the main guys up there on pound-for-pound talent, which is a weird phrase that doesn't really matter for anything. Nick Watson's right up there, whether he, as a small forward at 170 centimetres, is a genuine, top 5 player or top 5 draft pick remains to be seen. But on that pound for pound stuff, he's up there for sure. And then, I've forgotten your question, but it'd be those 2 if you want me to.
So I guess
reel out the rest,
going kind of through. So 1 at Reid.
Yeah.
I had the same. So I've gone Reid, Walter, McKercher. Your kind of top 3 is the same.
Yeah.
And then at number 4.
I won't give you them in any specific order, because we do have the power rankings coming out on July 31st. But in terms of the next few, it'd be Ethan Reid, Dan Curtin, Nick Watson, as I said. Sanders and Dersma. They're probably all in the mix.
Yeah, I think I had it at 4, Dan Curtin, and then maybe Watson with him in that group, and then the next group, Dersma. Mm-hmm. And then one after that, maybe Sanders.
Yep.
Dersma, I'm just getting more and more attracted to as a prospect. He's just been absolutely fantastic. And I think as far as upside, keeps getting better and better. And Dan Curtin's versatility is just, I guess, off the chain. And what clubs want to get out of him, they probably can, no matter where they put him.
Absolutely. And that's why, all of them have their pluses and reasons why you would want to put him in that top 5. And just on Harley Reid, because I have remembered the question that you did originally ask me. We focus on the sort of trailing pack, but him himself, his championships where he did win the MVP, he had to deal with a little bit throughout that as well. Came in pretty underdone, had that head knock and about a month away, and came in underdone, had to be camped at full forward, while he was playing the first game, and eventually got his midfield minutes up, and then we see in the 4th game as a really solid effort. And even against WA, he was fantastic. So, for me, that's why he's still number one. He's going to be that generational talent, the midfielder you can build a team around. He can play anywhere though as well. So he's the real difference maker, and he's going to be the standout still.
So what happens now? National Championships over. We've got some NAB League games still to go. Some clubs have actually packed up. We do have obviously a few games still to go in the fixture in the back end before we hit November. So I guess what's kind of on the calendar for some of the state league competitions?
Yeah, so we've got that TOC Cup still going on, the NAB League, the Talent League. As you said, they're going to build towards the end of the season. They've got the wildcard round and finals after about, I think, 5 more rounds. So that's coming up pretty quick in terms of the state leagues. Some players will be making the jump to VFL if they don't have any Talent League on. So there's some good possibilities there, particularly for the Northern Academy prospects, because otherwise they'd be playing Quaffle or AFL Premier in Sydney and Canberra, which isn't the highest level. So they might get some opportunities, and then obviously in the Sandful and the Waffle, you've got guys even like Sid Draper as the bottom H. He's made his league debut recently. Will McCabe's made his reserves debut for Central District. So it's going to be guys rolling through the senior grades in the Sandful and Waffle as those seasons again round out to a close. Yeah,
we've had a few this year. I think Dan Curtin will look pretty good at senior level. Indy Kirk, Jake Rogers played a game in the VFL for Gold Coast. It'd be great to see Jed Walter get a crack. For the Suns, who are absolutely flying in the VFL this season. I think that comes down to their list size and pretty much being able to have a full team of AFL listed players. So that'd be a great experience for the players who you assume are going to be at the Suns next year, even already getting to play with their future teammates. So that'll be good. And then in the VFL, Dersma, Reed, they've all had a couple of cracks in the VFL as well. So that's kind of the one to look forward to. A few questions we've had submitted from fans, and we'll kind of run through a couple, and I'll get some insight from you. First one from Tom Ledson. Crows in need of a midfielder. Who could they look at with their pick? So assuming their first pick, I think it's currently equated at pick 7. I think that probably pushes out to. I think they'll be a bit higher come the end of the season, and maybe looking at pick 10. So in that range, after a midfielder, they're probably not going to be looking at local talent, just given Moore, Deline and McCabe are all either unavailable through the father-son rule for McCabe, or not really that midfield type, more attacking forward options. So they'll be dipping back into the Victorian talent pool. Who do you kind of see in their sights, or who could be that midfielder in that kind of 7 to 12 bracket, we'll say?
Yeah, it's probably not a draft for midfielders, to be honest, and in their range in particular. So if you are after a midfielder, you probably want to be either having pick 1 with Harley Reid or a top 5er, so you can get McKercher or Sanders potentially. Outside of that, maybe you're looking at Zane Dersma, but again, he's probably not a pure midfielder. He's that mid-forward who is arguably more natural in attack.
He's like a Nat Fyfe type. I think he's compared himself to Nat Fyfe as well, where I think he'll probably steer more towards the forward trajectory, but that build, athleticism, I think puts on a bit of meat, and he'll have a bit more power. Taller option, can certainly play midfield, and a great attacking player. But he's an interesting one. Crows strictly midfield. It is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, and like in that range, if you are still looking for a midfielder, maybe a bit of class as well. Because I do have a lot of guys who roll through that midfield that are just solid operators and good ball winners. A guy like Darcy Wilson could be up for grabs if it is that sort of pick 10, a little bit towards the back end of that top 10. He's handy. They could even make a bid on Jake Rogers because he's got that class as well. Joel Frazier's another. It depends where it falls, but on Dersma as well, it should be pointed out that his siblings are playing in South Australia. So they're at Port Adelaide. It'd be funny if we get a Dersma showdown at one point with Xavier and Zane, and obviously Yazzie with the women's team. All they're kind of the possibilities if they are looking for a midfielder, I'd say in that range,
I probably had Frazier as that one. They would like some maybe outside polish. They've got Dawson, who's been fantastic, but I think they want to use him inside as much as they can, along with Rory Laird and some of the young guys that are coming through that are more, like you said, hard on inside midfield players. Paul Seasman's future a bit up in the air as well. So play like Frazier on the outside. Wilson kind of can be a smooth operator on the outside as well. And as we mentioned, if it's pick 7 to 10, it's probably more likely going to be 10 or later if you've got bids for Walter coming through. If you've got bids for even Rogers or Reed coming through, so it is going to get pushed back a little bit, and then they'll find themselves at that mid first round, late first round selection. Second one comes through from Bodie Lovegrove, a bit of a mock draft for West Coast. So they've got pick 1. On top of that, they've got 19, 35, 37, and then 2 in the 50s. Pick 1's the big discussion point. Hold it or trade it. I'm of the view they split it. Try and get in 3 of those top 15 picks, ideally a couple in maybe the top 8 group, and then 1 after that. That could get you access to the likes of Dan Curtin, Colton Telstra, and Mitch Edwards, 3 WA talent players, and I think there's a bit of a gap between them and maybe the next few WA players, and some even of those might be attached to other clubs anyway through NGA. And like I said, they've got 1 spot at pick 19 and another at 35, so they might get pushed out to or the second one might get pushed out to 40. So I'm of the view that they would split and go for those 3 players. On the other hand, take Reed, run away with it, and back him in for the long term. How do you kind of see it from maybe the pick 1 perspective first, what the Eagles might look to do?
Yeah, I've probably been in that camp of splitting it for most of the year. It's such a tough one because if you have a talent like Harley Reid on the table, you probably want to take him. And I don't think he's the kind of guy to up and leave, you know what I mean? So I think if they chose him, he's been to Perth now, played a chance game there.
Door stopped at the airport.
Yeah, which is a bit how you're going.
They're already pretty big with him over there.
Yeah, but I think he would suit that team and being able to turn them around and set some standards, particularly in quality of play. He's a good player. So I've probably changed my mind a little bit and would stick with it, but I can certainly see the upside, particularly with how they drafted recently, getting in Jinby and Hewitt, for example, both local talents in that sort of that first round range. That's a great option to have, especially if you've got Curtin and Edwards, for example, and even Colton Tholstrup to take in that first round. So I can see the argument for it, but I would probably keep it and take Harley Reid at the moment.
Yeah, I think one thing that has helped the Eagles so well to retain some of their interstate talent is facilities. Are obviously a big one for players when they're weighing up their future.
Vouch for that. They're great.
And if you go, I think, over to the West Coast facilities, they have some of the best, if not the best, in the league, and obviously they're backed so well financially, so that'll only get better as an experience for a player. So that's certainly helped them. They hold Reed, so that's at pick 1. Their next pick will come the first selection of the second round. They're probably, I know if they have got Reed, they'll probably be, that's a midfielder right there, but they might want to fine-tune that even a little bit more so. Reed can certainly play in attack or even at half-back if they wanted to and kind of get a decent rotation there with Ruben Jinby. But if they wanted maybe another midfielder, I'd be saying at the start of the second round, maybe who might they be looking at?
Yeah, again,
a couple of names.
Like midfielders are tough. It's tough to really nail down, 1, who the best ones are after the top 15, and 2, if they're even draftable. So that might be sparse. For me, I think that even topping up on their key position talent in the long term, like they could even look at a Granger Barras, getting him home, because he's not getting that much opportunity, and he was a very high draft pick. They're going to have stock if they split pick 1, and even thereafter if they don't, to have some trade value so that they could get him through the door. If not, I'm looking at a guy like Ollie Murphy. I think he'd be great value in that kind of range, just to be a developable key defender, which is probably an area that they can build a little bit of depth just to help out who they've already got. Like Tom Barras, the poor bloke, he's under the pump most weeks. They've even had to shift Oscar Allen there on the weekend before he went down. So that might be a player that they look at. Otherwise, even a bit of X factor with that, a guy like Colton Tholstrup, Jack Deline could be one that they look at. So there's a few guys just with a bit of flair that they might look towards, those big characters.
If he drifts into the second round, it'll be stunning.
Which I think is likely, to be honest. But he would be a good value get, just on upside, for sure.
Just across the border from SA, and pretty, if he can hit that, reach the levels that I think many had come to expect, a forward line of him and Oscar Allen would be quite handy, especially if you do have Harley Reid kicking it to you. So, that'd be pretty solid. That'll wrap up today's show. Mike, thank you for joining us. Where can, I guess, our listeners and readers find some of Rookie Me's latest stuff? I know you've got your rankings coming out as well soon.
Yeah, so we've got full wrap up of the championships, a bit of the chat that we've had here today with Mitch. That's at central.rookieme.com/AFL. At Rookie Me Central is where you can find us on all of the good social media platforms. So chuck us a follow, and if you see me at the footy, shout out. Don't be shy. So I'm at most games. So be good to run out the rest of the season and see how the kids go.
See him there with his big Carlton beanie on most weekends.
Blues are back, baby.
That'll wrap up today's draft special. Mark, thanks once again for joining us to cover all things AFL draft. And then thanks once again for watching. See all our content on zerohanger.com. You can also catch us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time.